Judi Dench is still going strong in 2024, the year she turned 90. She is now unable to read scripts and requires someone to point out the locations of the lines for her. Despite this, she continues to paint on Tuesdays, turns up to film shoots, and is currently writing a book detailing all of her acting roles. She received the news that she was going blind in 2012 from her doctors. Eventually, in 2022, she came clean about her inability to see on set. How then does she maintain this behavior? For what reason did she formerly tattoo the name of Harvey Weinstein on her rear end? She has played stranger roles on screen than the truth. Judi Dench came into this world in the sleepy York village of Worth on December 9, 1934. Upon her birth, there was no indication that her lineage had a touch of royalty. However, it wasn't until a BBC program almost 9 decades later that it was revealed she was a direct descendant of the Danish nobleman Claus Bill, who lived in the 1500s. The Renaissance astronomer Tycho Brahe, who revolutionized our understanding of the stars, was so distantly related to Judi. Even before she was born, Reginald Dench was an extraordinary man. Having served in WWI, he had twice been awarded the Military Cross and had experienced the horrors of trench warfare. Eleonora, Judi's mother, was his classmate while he was a medical student in Dublin after the war. No one could have predicted at the time that their daughter would marry into a family that mixed nobility, science, and performance. In 1939, Judi's father was appointed physician to the York Theatre Royal. She was only 5 years old at the time. Because of that part, she was exposed to the acting business at a young age. She would follow in his footsteps backstage, seeing the nervous performers, shattered stage objects, and the peculiar atmosphere that builds up to a performance. The theater lost power in the middle of a play in 1940 due to an air raid. The grown-ups froze, the sirens howled, and the building trembled silently. Singing an old folk song, 6-year-old Judi immediately put everyone at ease. Her words echoed across the room until the all-clear signal was heard. According to her dad, the performers always remembered it. The living room transformed into a rehearsal space for actors as scripts were read aloud over tea at their house. Before Judi even knew how to spell, she was acquiring acting skills. She had her stage debut in the York Mystery Plays, an ancient local tradition that dates back to the 1300s. When she was just 7 years old, under the starry sky, Judi portrayed a young shepherd boy in a nativity scene. Overhead, searchlights illuminated the clouds as German planes soared through the sky. She strayed from her prepared remarks and started comparing the searchlights to the Star of Bethlehem. Following a gulp, the audience applauded. Despite the chaos of the battle, her remarks provided some clarity. Her mom, who was in charge of the costumes, was embarrassed. But the rest of the group was astounded. Just now, Judi had made a religious performance relevant to our times. She enrolled in the Quaker-run boarding school Mount School, renowned for its quiet discipline and stringent regulations, when she was 9 years old. Unfavorably, her accent set her out. The other girls made fun of her voice and called her snobbish. However, the school uniform turned out to be an unexpected refuge for her. The sharp collars and rigid fabric didn't seem like clothing to Judi. It was all for show. Each day was like a scene in a play to her, and she wore them with an air of drama. She played Ariel in a 1947 school performance of Tempest and was so engrossed in the role that she fractured another student's finger while doing a stunt. All of a sudden, she felt dread and then respect for it. Once an outcast tormented by the group, she became the popular role model. Judi didn't really want to attend York School of Art when she enrolled there at the age of 18. In the event that acting wasn't her calling, her parents wanted her to major in set design. She drew people, not settings, for the majority of her classes. Hundreds of her paintings were discovered concealed under her bed when her brother Jeffrey, who was already studying acting in London, returned home for Christmas. Their enraged father learned the truth. In response, Judi pulled off an extraordinary feat. She threatened to become an actor, or die trying, on New Year's Eve, and she burnt all of her sketches in the fireplace. There was a week-long silence between her parents and her. Judi got her start at London's Central School of Speech and Drama in 1954. It had formerly been housed in Royal Albert Hall. In the first year, pupils were even forbidden from speaking. With an emphasis on self-control, they worked on breathing and movement. Phonetics, poetry, and mime were all parts of Judi's education. She initially had issues with her voice. Her projection was lacking, and she came dangerously close to failing her assessments. However, she made progress with ongoing instruction. The Elsie Fogarty Prize was among her many accolades by the time she was a third year at the school. She had fully transformed. She went from being shy and unsure of herself to being the class valedictorian. The Old Vic was her audition venue just before she graduated. Casting her as Oilia in Hamlet was a daring move by director Michael Benthel. She had not even graduated from high school. The theater community was taken aback. She was dubbed London's new Oilia by the press. Reviews, however, arrived afterwards. Her critics in Liverpool ripped her to shreds. People felt she was uninteresting and unmemorable. She needed to disappear for a few years to discover herself, according to one critic, because she had been built up too quickly. Judi wasn't a part of the group that toured the United States. It was Benthel's way of telling her that Olia would now be played by someone else. Even though it was her first serious injury on the job, her luck eventually changed. Judi was summoned to reprise her Paris performance after her substitute bowed out. On this occasion, reviewers saw a change. Particularly in the scenes involving insanity, they complimented her for her control and nuance. They said it was the best Hamlet they'd ever seen in French newspapers. Judi had recovered quickly. However, those initial blunders remained etched in her memory. One scenario in her audition for that part saw her acting out Olia's drowning. She put her entire training, her ability to control her breath, her physical discipline, and her emotional clarity to use. Although it lacked conventional drama, it evoked profound emotions. John Neville, who played her co-star, had faith in her even when critics had doubts. As her mentor, he instilled in her the need of remaining calm and genuine onstage. She put in 12-hour shifts at the Old Vic. The day begins with rehearsal and ends with the performance. She was unflappable in the face of the brutality. In 1958, she made her debut in London, and it was equally challenging as her Liverpool debut. In the same year, meanwhile, she played Catherine in Henry V and shocked onlookers with an improvised phrase that caused the audience to yell. She was despised by some who felt she had deviated from tradition. Some thought it was brilliant. With only $8 in her paycheck each week, she persevered. While performing Juliet during a 1959 US tour, she passed out on stage. Her anxiety had finally gotten the best of her. Just before performances, she started throwing up and eating very little. It was staged, the audience believed, when she fell into Romeo's arms. There was mayhem behind the scenes, but her co-star kept going and improvised. While some advocated for her removal, others stood by her side. Judi was embarrassed. She nearly gave up acting altogether. She performed the role of Isabella in the 1960 Edinburgh Festival production of Measure for Measure. They were ecstatic. However, Judi was falling apart behind the scenes. On a nightly basis, she would show up early, vomit, recite the alphabet backwards, and consume 6 digestive biscuits prior to performing. The other performers made fun of her by calling her Sick Dame Judi, but she never sobbed while performing. She gave ferocious performances. Her shocking departure from the Old Vic in 1961 stunned everyone. They even offered her big roles and more money, but she turned them down. The preferential attention given to elderly actresses was something she despised. The icing on the cake was when someone characterized her most recent performance as adequate rather than outstanding. Snipping was her reaction. She had threatened to refuse to be a background vocalist in her own profession during a meeting. She uprooted that winter to become a member of the Royal Shakespeare Company. It was a daring step that set her back professionally for a long time. However, it was also the turning point in Judi Dench's career, when she started to take charge of her own destiny. Judi Dench made her stage debut with the Royal Shakespeare Company in December 1961. On that fateful night, she played Anna at the Sherry Orchard at the tender age of 27. She was there with other theater greats including Peggy Ashcraftoft and John Gielgud. However, the subsequent events were unexpected. As the orchard is razed to the ground in the last scene, Dench's hushed, nervous performance resounded through the audience. It was soft. It lacked ostentation. Tragic loss resounded like a rumble in the night. London critics were raving about her within days. Their acclaim for her comeback to the stage was unprecedented. Out of thin air, she transformed into someone completely different from the Vic seasons before. Pay attention to her. She returned to the stage at Stratford-upon-Avon 4 months later, in April 1962. When it comes to Measure for Measure, it's Isabella this time. Everyone in the courtroom tightened up the second she entered and approached Angelo. Onlookers were visibly anxious, as if waiting for something to happen. Her voice wavered, implored, and struggled. Some reviewers were perplexed by her. They thought she was too contemporary, too emotional, and too raw. However, a new emotion washed over the spectators. This is not how Shakespeare intended for his works to feel. However, it worked for Dench. It wasn't merely acting that she did that season. Warning shots, they were called. Through her work, classical theater was being transformed. Next, the summer of 1963 rolled along, the tour of West Africa. Along with the Nottingham Playhouse Company, Dench departed from England in her role as Lady Macbeth. It was a hellish environment. The power went out in Ghana during a nighttime sleepwalking incident. The only light coming from the stage torches, and the vultures perched in the trees illuminated her performance. But she persisted nonetheless. As she yelled out, "Out-damped spot," a woman in the audience yelled out, "She's washing her hands and there's no basin." The scene was both beautiful and crazy. A volunteer stepped in when the witch actor had to leave due to a toothache. Nevertheless, she fumbled over her lines and uttered, "Wool bat and 2 pork chops." Dench couldn't help but giggle when she remembered the incident afterwards. Contrarily, she maintained complete concentration while performing. That journey transformed her. She returned with tales to tell, wounds to heal, and a firm grasp on her trade. She performed as the viola soloist in Twelfth Night at the Oxford Playhouse in 1964. She hinted at her range in her act as the cunning woman who bends gender roles. Still, more was on the way. Her first feature film role was in 1965's 4 in the Morning. The story took place in the seedier parts of London and was told in stark black and white. Her character was a distraught mother who was left to deal with her infant's cries and her own mental breakdowns. After her alcoholic husband left her, Hollywood snubbed the picture. It fell softly but with a resounding impact. She won the BAFTA for Most Promising Newcomer for her performance. Now she was an actress in movies. However, there was a cost associated with that award. After that, producers began casting her in more roles with damaged women who were melancholy. And for a time, she felt confined, portraying variations on the same suffering, while other people got the Shakespearean leads she wanted. For her 1969 RSC return, she portrayed the role of Portia in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice. On this day, however, things were different. Her Portia lacked both kindness and virtue. She was icy, calculated, and incisive. She exuded an air of unflinching authority and clarity as she gave the renowned quality of mercy speech. A member of the crowd named Laurence Olivier leaned in close and murmured his support. Reactions to the production were varied. Everyone was in agreement, albeit some appreciated the daring and some didn't. Dench had returned, and she was reinstituting her previous methods. Not out of any intrinsic desire, but simply because the money was better on television. She started prioritizing TV jobs over lengthy runs in the theater. She, like all giants, had to pay her debts. It was a subtle but telling indication that repertory theater's heyday was coming to an end. She reprised her role as Lady Macbeth in 1976, opposite Ian McKellen. They also played at the other location, a much smaller facility with seating for only 200 people. Just 12 circular boxes made up the stage. Silence, performers, and no sets or illusions. McKellen flinched as Dench clawed the air forcefully during the sleepwalking sequence. Her physical intensity had not been forewarned to him. A priest, persuaded that they were calling upon actual evil, sat in the front row one night clutching a cross. There were 147 iterations of it. Its fame spread quickly, and then 1979 rolled around. The production was adapted for television by ITV. The sound crew captured Dench's voice quivering as if she were genuinely going crazy during her cries in that identical scenario, which were now filmed in close-up. Afterwards, she confessed that the part actually gave her nightmares. The $250,000 budget yielded BAFTA nominations and critical acclaim, despite the filming taking place in just 14 days. It continued to trouble McKellen, he said. Also that year, Dench had another opportunity to giggle in the comedy of mistakes. Once again, the setting was a pleasant Mediterranean village, and the plot was a musical. Her character was Adriana. Makeup was unable to conceal the scar she caused on her co-star after she smacked her so forcefully during filming. It required multiple shots. After 156 successful performances, the play finally made it to television in 1978. Casting directors and viewers saw that Dench was more than tragedy and suffering. Her timing was impeccable when it came to comedy. She portrayed the solitary Irish woman Imogen Lancashire in the film Langish Go Down. Filmed in 1978, the narrative evoked feelings of isolation and yearning. Filming took place covertly over 6 weeks, and there were some bumps along the way. Dench sobbed on set at an especially touching sequence. Because of how lonely the part was, it affected her mental state. Since Dench had already moved on by the time the film's 2014 Irish premiere took place, the 36-year restriction on nudity in the film was moot. People still kept it in their minds. A look of anguish in her eyes, a profound silence. Madame Rankaya, the woman who had lost everything, returned to the cherry orchard in 1981. She wore the identical attire from beginning to end of the estate sales scene, claiming that her persona wouldn't alter while her life fell apart. Her unplanned, unscripted actions, such as peering into empty rooms, became the most disturbing parts of the play. On British television in 1981, something enchanting happened in a subtle way. A charming romantic comedy that didn't push too hard to grab viewers' attention, but instead won them over with subtle chemistry, debuted. An improbable couple navigating middle-aged romance, Judi Dench and Michael Williams, who is actually Judi's husband, portrayed Laura and Mike, respectively. It was more than just acting. Their true 30-year marriage provided the warmth on screen. Michael, the relaxed gardener, played by Judi, was a perfectionist translator. He would claim that her reputation didn't frighten him, but rather, it delighted him. Perhaps that's the secret to its success. Nobody in the crowd felt like they were in on a performance. It was as if they were witnessing two individuals attempting to decipher each other for the first time. For her performance, she was honored with 2 British Academy Film Awards, twice in the years 1982 and 1985. Few performers have ever been able to successfully play both roles. What followed was a sudden change in direction. A Passage to India, which was released in 1984, featured Judi in a very different role. The movie was a blowout, with a budget of over $16 million and the type of pressure that only David Lean could impose after a 14-year hiatus. The film was shot entirely on location. Miss Quested was portrayed by Judi, who depicted an innocent British woman whose baseless charge causes chaos. She was nominated for an Oscar for her portrayal in the sequence set in the Marabar Caves. Its detractors were correct in their assessment that it sprang from Nave terror. It was unfiltered, awkward, and essential. With Judi at its core, the picture felt like a showdown with colonialism specters. In a room with a view, she made yet another shift just 12 months after that. No ghosts or shattered hearts befell her in this place. Funny, that woman. As the overbearing chaperone Charlotte Bartlett, she was a constant distraction for the young Lucy Honeychurch. There was perfect timing in her every move, from the awkward pauses to the gasps. Many found it amusing and thoroughly enjoyed it. With 8 nominations and 3 wins, the picture established itself as a landmark in its own right. Best Supporting Actress was Dench's BAFTA win. Helena Bonham Carter's career took off, and Merchant Ivory Productions became known for producing high-quality historical dramas. Judi returned to the stage 3 years later, in 1987, for a daring staging of Shakespeare's plays. She co-starred with Anthony Hopkins as Cleopatra in a groundbreaking National Theatre production. She painted a picture of a diminutive Cleopatra going through menopause. Funny, insightful, and effective, it was perfect. They had not heard Shakespeare this intelligent in years, according to The Guardian. Even real snakes made an appearance. The one she was wearing fell off during the curtain call. She was so startled that couldn't speak for 2 days. Henry V followed in 1989. The film's director and star, Kenneth Branagh, was only 28 years old at the time. Judi swiftly assumed the role of mistress. Tech problems necessitated reshooting her lengthy statement over Falstaff's death, not because she messed up. Henry asked Branagh, "Who do you think you are?" Branagh responded with a giggle, and Henry echoed her sentiment, saying, "It's not called mistress, quickly IV." The excitement on set was contagious. The film transformed Shakespeare's screen persona by being realistic and harsh. The picture won an Oscar for costumes, while Branagh was nominated for Best Director. The year 1995 was a watershed moment. Judi entered the world of James Bond. M was her title once she became M. This was revolutionary. The character was inspired by the real-life MI5 chief Stella Remington, and she was the first woman to play it. In the opening scene, she referred to Bond as a sexist, misogynist dinosaur. That was a blow. She wasn't even fazed. According to Pierce Brosnan, both he and her were anxious that day. She appeared to have been the head of MI6 for quite some time on screen, though. Forever, that one instant changed Bond's rules. She played Queen Victoria in Mrs. Brown, which was released 2 years after that. She took home a Golden Globe for her performance in it. On the other hand, chaos was brewing behind the scenes. Unbeknownst to them, her husband Michael was unwell, As his lung cancer progressed in 1999, Judi was forced to abandon a Broadway performance in order to be by his side. She spoke it freely in interviews. She was unable to act in his last moments, although she feared disappointing the crowd. His death was in 2001. In hindsight, it became clear that she was acting out her sorrow on screen while dealing with her own genuine loss. Shakespeare in Love followed. Despite just having 8 minutes on screen, she won an Oscar for her performance as Queen Elizabeth I. The victory was not without its detractors. The film's producer, Harvey Weinstein, allegedly spent $5 million on an Oscar campaign, a sum twice as large as what the majority of studios allocated. Gatherings, clinking of hands, votes muttered. It is widely considered to have been one of the most underhanded Oscar campaigns in history. Regardless of the political climate, Judi's performance was memorable. Snappy, succinct, and long-lasting, her second Bond picture, 1997's Tomorrow Never Dies, gave her greater freedom. 14 days of filming rather than the originally planned 3. She took charge, joked about Bond's ex-girlfriends, and began to carve out a more strategic EEM, which ended up being the one that lasted. Over the course of 7 films spanning 20 years, she would solidify the part. But a different thing was happening behind the scenes. Even though her vision was beginning to go in 1999, she gave a passionate performance as Titania in a Royal Shakespeare Company production of the play. The symptoms of age-related macular degeneration have started to manifest. At first, all she required was a larger font size for her writings. She required someone to read the lines out to her by 2012 because she was completely unable to do them alone. She finally came clean about her need for a gadget to aid her memorization in 2023, when she described the line's placement on the page. But she persisted nevertheless. Something out of the ordinary occurred in 2000 when Judi Dench played Armand Voisin in the film Chocolate. She became someone who loved chocolate, not only someone who acted like it. Dench joked that she gained 10 pounds during the 4-month filming in a peaceful French village, which she attributed to method eating. Dench really believed the director when he said that everyone should eat the chocolate. She transformed her trailer into a makeshift bakery in between sets, preparing treats for the cast. Regular cast members included Johnny Depp and Juliette Binoche. Dench joked that putting on weight was all in the sake of study, and it was a blast. Something heavier, nevertheless, arrived the very following year. She plays the role of the brilliant, but Alzheimer's-stricken writer Iris Murdoch in the film Iris. It was challenging to film as well as watch. Dench would cry during emotionally taxing moments in which Iris becomes disoriented. There were occasions when she would need 30 minutes alone in her dressing room to cry before she could come back. The authenticity lingered like a fog after she researched actual patients prior to filming. No longer did she act impolitely. According to one of her coworkers, Iris was so engrossed in her character that she forgot everyone's identities on set. She was bestowed a BAFTA for the impactful outcome. Notes on a Scandal, which came out in 2006, elicited a different type of reaction. Plot twist. Dench portrayed Barbara, a teacher whose crush was on one of her younger female coworkers. Some thought it was daring, while others thought it might hurt. Outrage ensued. It was criticized by advocacy groups for perpetuating harmful stereotypes from a bygone era. Dench was unfazed. She defended Barbara by saying that she was complex but not bad. The hate letters, however, persisted. Nonetheless, reviewers were astounded by her performance. According to one publication, she was more deserving of the Oscar that year than Helen Mirren. Dench reprised her role as M opposite Daniel Craig's Bond in that year's Casino Royale. Her spontaneous outburst at a rehearsal was, "You've got a bloody cheek." Despite not being in the original script, it ended up in the final cut. They used the line in their marketing since it hit so hard. It turns out that she was mentally rehearsing her scolding of her actual grandchild. The expression of shock on Craig's face in the film was an accurate reflection of how caught off he was. Dench elevated realism to new heights in 2008's Quantum of Solace. Helicopters, explosives, and high-stakes chase scenes were all part of her role. Earplugs or other forms of protection would have been standard issue for most performers. Dench. Since she knew M wouldn't be using earplugs during an emergency, she decided not to too. Staying true to her character, she even declined communication earpieces. She had permanent hearing loss in one ear by the time filming wrapped. She never once grumbled that the insurance company refused to pay for it. She had the finest parts in what critics deemed as a less impressive Bond flick. Dame Sybil Thorne-DeKeek's position had an unusual behind-the-scenes twist when she joined My Week with Marilyn in 2011. Dench and Michelle Williams actually didn't work together on any scenes. 2 weeks before to the main shoot, Dench taped her scenes. Williams made a staged hand gesture toward Dench in one scene. Since filming concluded just before the anniversary of Heath Ledger's, Williams' ex-partner death, the timing brought an extra layer of sadness. Loss, both on and off screen, was prevalent throughout the film. Dench personally was dealing with a problem at the same time as her Skyfall character M died. Dench has advanced macular impairment due to aging by 2012. Scripts were no longer legible to her. Like bedtime stories, her friends had to read her lines out to her. As the light shifted, so did her perception. Sunny days would be perfect for her crossword puzzles. Everything, however, disappeared as soon as clouds moved in. It was all the more realistic because her vision was failing at the same time her character was dying. Her next role was a year later in Philomena, where she portrayed a nun with ties to the sinister history of the Magdalenaries in Ireland. Critics felt the film stopped short in depicting the depth of the character's suffering. They said it played down the seriousness of the atrocities. There was government complicity. Girls as young as 9 years old were compelled to work, and mass graves were discovered. Though Dench gave a moving performance, many Irish viewers were hoping for a more intense and honest portrayal. She received another Oscar nomination while the argument raged on. The reappearance of Inspector M is accompanied by a video message conveyed from the afterlife. Dench was doing more than just performing a role. Due to her severely impaired vision, she frequently required assistance from others to guide her during filming. Regardless, she nailed the moment. The spectral footage came off as computer-generated to some viewers. No, it wasn't on purpose. The impact was eerie, and it was all due to the skilled use of camera work. Dench attempted something more riskier after filming All Is True. She had her first tattoo when she became 81 years old, given to her by her daughter, a vicious DM tattooed onto her wrist. Her co-stars made fun of the fact that it first said, "Fish of the Day" in Latin. However, it served as her global message. She continued unabated, unfazed by the onset of age-related eyesight loss. Her body jokes were nothing new. For fun, she had tattooed Harvey Weinstein's name on her buttocks years ago. On this occasion, however, the ink was authentic. Nobody expected her 87-year-old performance in Belfast. In the midst of the unrest in Northern Ireland in 1969, she portrayed a caring grandma. She continued to improvise lines in flawless Belfast slang despite her nearly gone vision and reliance on auditory cues to navigate the set. The picture was nominated for 7 Academy Awards. Dench was issued one of those. She has never really recovered from the devastating loss of her husband, Michael Williams. Lung cancer took his life in 2001. His wedding ring is still on her finger. She continues to communicate with him daily. She never remarried after declaring in an interview, "Grief feels like suddenly falling into a hole you didn't see coming." Her marriage to her husband occurred in 1971, joined by Ryan Reynolds and Will Ferrell. Dench made an appearance in Spirited in 2022. However, by that point, it was hard to understand a script. Everything had to be sung to her. Each line's location on the page was indicated by a machine that she utilized. Even though she had trouble learning new material, she could nonetheless recite complete Shakespeare plays word for word. She may have ended her career with that Christmas picture. She took up the role of patron for the Yorkshire Macular Degeneration Fund in October 2024. She came clean and stated, "I can't see on set anymore." However, she insisted she had no intention of quitting acting or painting. The highest concentration of cases in England is in Yorkshire, the county where she was born. Her unwavering backing was crucial. In her 90th year, she made a joke about being 29 years old. Tuesdays were her painting days. Pottery was her new hobby. Bananagrams was a breeze for her. Despite requiring assistance when entering events, she managed to cram her week with a lot of projects. Her upcoming book will be a collection of anecdotes from all of her acting roles, titled Shakespeare, The Man Who Pays the Rent. The run-throughs, the blunders, and the reality outside the stage. It is her method of demonstrating that her memory remains keen and her spirit remains unwavering, despite the deterioration of her eyesight.